It started on a Tuesday, but it didn't feel like a Tuesday. The sky was too bright, the coffee tasted too sharp, and the way my wife left the house was calculated, like a scene she had rehearsed. She kissed me on the cheek, the same mechanical peck as always, but this time, she didn't meet my eyes. That was new. That was the first real sign I should have caught. Madison told me she had a meeting downtown, something about a new client whose time zone made things complicated. She had her tote bag, the one she always carried to yoga, not work. I didn't question it. I watched her walk to the car, start it, and drive off. But the moment the taillights vanished around the corner, something inside me itched. Not suspicion, not jealousy, something else. Something older, primal. A stillness before the gut turns over and tells you it's about to be a long, strange week. I didn't follow her that day. I went to work. I filed reports, I took calls, I smiled through meetings. But by 6 p.m., I was sitting in my car with the engine running, staring at her location on my phone. Yeah, we'd shared locations, something she'd insisted on for safety. Funny how people use trust like a curtain to hide behind. The dot said she was on Greenwell Street. Not a restaurant, not an office, a residential block, a place where no client would be waiting, unless their business involved dim lights and scented candles. I didn't drive there, not that night. I didn't want to be that guy. I told myself maybe she had a friend in that building, maybe it was nothing. I went home, poured a drink, and sat in the dark. She came home just past 9, talking on the phone, laughing. I watched her from the hallway. She didn't know I was there. She didn't see me watching her kick off her shoes, toss her bag down like she had no weight on her shoulders. She didn't smell like perfume, she smelled like hotel soap. The next morning I followed her. She left at 8:15 a.m., again with the yoga tote, again with the little peck on the cheek. I waited 5 minutes, grabbed my keys, and followed the dot. This time, she went straight to a parking garage, pulled in, and parked. I stayed back, watched from the corner. 23 minutes passed. Then he showed up, button-down shirt, beard, holding a coffee tray like he knew her order by heart. She got out of her car, walked straight up to him, took the coffee with one hand and his face with the other. She kissed him. Not a polite kiss, not a mistake, not a greeting, a deliberate, slow, familiar kiss. I didn't take a picture. I didn't need to. That image is burned behind my eyes, always waiting when I closed them. She kissed him, and then they walked off together toward the elevators like it was routine, like they had done it dozens of times, like I didn't exist. I didn't go home. I didn't go to work. I drove until I ran out of gas. There's something unreal about betrayal when it's fresh. It doesn't come in as a roar, it slips and quietly settles in your chest, and starts to rewrite the past. Every memory gets infected. Every laugh, every whisper in the dark, every road trip playlist corrupted. Suddenly, you're not looking at your marriage anymore, you're looking at a long, slow con. When she got home that night, she found me in the garage, sitting in the dark. I didn't say anything. She didn't ask. She walked past me like I was a ghost and went inside. It was that moment, that exact way she avoided my eyes and stepped over my silence, that made me realize something important. She wasn't sorry. Not even close. And something inside me, something I hadn't felt in years, clicked on. Not anger, not vengeance, clarity. This wasn't a heartbreak. This was going to be a reckoning. The next morning, I woke up before her. I didn't sleep, not really. I just lay there with my eyes open, watching the early light shift through the blinds, listening to her breathe beside me like everything was normal, like she hadn't spent yesterday in someone else's arms. She looked peaceful. That pissed me off more than anything. I got up, took my time in the kitchen, made coffee, toasted a bagel, sat at the table, and stared at nothing. She came downstairs wearing one of my t-shirts, her hair still messy, yawning like a cat that had slept too well. She didn't look at me, not right away. She just went to the fridge, poured herself some juice, leaned against the counter like the world was fine. Then she said it. "You okay?" That was it. That was the best she could do. I wanted to answer with fire. I wanted to throw the juice glass across the room and ask her how it felt standing in our kitchen after sliding into a stranger's life like it was hers. But I didn't. I just looked at her, and I said, calm as a knife being drawn, "Who is he?" She froze for half a breath, then, God, she was quick. She blinked, tilted her head, and gave me the same confused little smile she always used when she lost her keys or forgot to take the trash out. "What guy?" "The guy from Greenwell Street, the one with the beard and the coffee, the one you kissed like I don't exist." The silence that followed was a masterpiece. Her face drained of color, her hand tightened around the glass, but her voice was still steady, still that soft, manipulative tone she used when she was about to lie. "That's just Jason. He's a friend. I don't even—" She laughed, light and fake. "What are you doing following me around? That's a little paranoid, Jake." There it was. Turn it around, make me the crazy one. Classic Madison. I stood up slowly, walked to the drawer, and pulled out the printed screenshots, her location data, time-stamped photos, the restaurant receipt I'd pulled from her car the night she said she was in Dallas. 2 AR, 1 wine, 1 lie. I laid them all out on the table like a detective in a movie. She didn't touch them. She didn't speak. She just stared at the photos, her lips parted slightly like she was trying to figure out what role to play next. She went with indifference. "Jake, this is ridiculous." "So what?" "I had lunch with a friend." "And so what?" "We kissed." "It was a silly slip." "You're blowing this out of proportion." That word, slip, like she had tripped on him, like he was a patch of ice in her path, and she just fell, lips first, onto his mouth. I laughed. It was ugly, broken, not even a real laugh, more like something trying to crawl out of me. "A silly slip? Madison, you've been slipping for months. Whole afternoons, weekends, hotel rooms. How long has this been going on?" She rolled her eyes. She actually rolled her eyes at me. "God, Jake, you're being dramatic." Then she did something I wasn't prepared for. She sat down, crossed her legs, and looked me dead in the eyes. "You've been boring for years. You don't even notice when I changed my hair. You stopped surprising me. You stopped chasing me. You just sit there and expect me to be the same woman I was at 25. News flash, I'm not." She said it so calmly, so deliberately, like she'd rehearsed it, like she'd wanted me to find out just so she could unload the speech she'd been building in her head for months. I didn't speak, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because the words in my mouth were lava, and I knew if I let them out, I'd never get them back. So I nodded, walked past her, went into our bedroom, pulled out a box from the back of the closet, and opened it. Her wedding dress was still inside, preserved, white, untouched. I stared at it for a long time. Then I took it out back. It burned faster than I expected. She didn't follow me outside. She watched from the patio door. I could see her silhouette in the glass, arms crossed, face blank, neither crying nor angry, just watching. When the fire died down, I took a can of black spray paint I'd used for a Halloween prop years ago, and on the wall of our garage, I wrote 4 words, big and uneven: "You slipped too far." When she came outside and saw it, she didn't speak. She didn't yell. She didn't apologize. She just froze. She didn't move for nearly a full minute, just stood there barefoot on the patio, eyes locked on the scorched pile of lace and charred beads at her feet. I watched her from the other side of the yard, her expression unreadable at first, caught somewhere between disbelief and a smirk she couldn't quite commit to. Then she stepped closer, slowly, carefully, like I was a live wire humming with something she hadn't seen from me in years. "Are you serious?" she said finally, barely above a whisper. "You actually burned my wedding dress?" I didn't answer. The words on the wall behind her said enough. She turned to look at them again, then back at me. That's when the mask cracked, and the sarcasm started to slip into her tone like venom through a smile. "That's mature, Jake. Real stable. Should I call someone, let them know my husband's lost his mind over a kiss?" That was the moment I saw her clearly. Not the version I had built in my head, Not the echo of who I thought I married, but the real Madison, cold, sharp, proud of the damage. She didn't want forgiveness. She wanted control. And when she realized she wasn't holding it anymore, that's when she panicked. She stepped closer again, this time fast, her fingers stabbing the air between us. "You're not a victim here, Jake. You checked out a long time ago. I needed something real, something exciting. You just sit at your desk all day, drink your boring coffee, fold your laundry like a robot. I'm supposed to live like that forever here, barely blinking? You wanted exciting?" I said. "You're about to get it." I turned and walked inside. She followed, yelling now, accusations, distractions, twisted half-truths. She said I was cruel, said I was emotionally distant, said I never really understood her. But I did. That was the problem. I went straight to the office and pulled out the folder I had prepared the night before. I dropped it on the table. Bank records, copies of messages, emails, a printed letter from a lawyer, signed but ready. Her face changed when she saw it. Not fear, but irritation, like I had become an inconvenience in her carefully scripted chaos. "Seriously? You've been planning this?" "No," I said. "You did. I just finally stopped pretending you hadn't." She picked up the envelope with 2 fingers, like it might stain her. "So what now? You want me out? Is that it?" "I don't want you anywhere near me," I said. "But I'm not going to do this your way. No screaming, no slamming doors. You wanted to burn something? Fine. Consider this the slow fire." She didn't say anything after that, not immediately. She walked away upstairs. Doors opened, drawers slammed. I didn't follow. I sat down at the table and stared at the ring on my finger, twisting it slowly until it felt like it didn't belong there anymore. When she came back down, she had a suitcase. Not even her good one, just the emergency bag she kept for quick getaways. She paused in the doorway, looking back, like she was waiting for me to stop her, maybe even wanted me to. But I didn't. "You regret this?" she said finally. "I already do," I said. Then she left. The silence she left behind wasn't peaceful. It was loaded. Every room in the house buzzed with the absence of her, the echo of everything she had said and everything she had never admitted. But beneath the numbness, something else was growing, something alive. I wasn't broken. I was waking up. The first full day without her felt like standing in a house where someone had rearranged all the furniture an inch to the left. Everything looked the same but felt off. The scent of her shampoo still lingered on the upstairs towels. Her laugh, sharp, sarcastic, always half-mocking, still echoed faintly in my head when I walked past the kitchen counter where she used to sit, scrolling on her phone, feet up like she owned the place. But she didn't anymore. And the silence. It was intentional now, not something that just happened between 2 people who ran out of things to say. The silence was clean, sharp, like the final cut of scissors through the last thread holding fabric together. I spent the morning calling the lawyer. The letter was signed before noon. I asked for everything to move fast, no back and forth, no room for her to twist the narrative. A clean break. We didn't have kids, thank God. No little hearts to sweep up in the wreckage, just property and memories and the lies. Around 1 p.m. my phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't answer. A voicemail buzzed in a minute later. I didn't want to hear her voice, not filtered through fake sweetness. But it wasn't her. It was him. Jason. "Hey man," he said. "I just, wanted to talk. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I didn't know she was still married. Okay? I thought you two were separated. That's what she told me. Look, if there's anything I can do to..." I hung up before he finished. I didn't need to hear another word from him. He was just the final domino in a long line of deception, the detail that made the whole ugly pattern visible. I didn't blame him anymore. I pitied him. Madison was good at manipulation. That was her real talent, her hobby, her art form. But hearing him try to apologize, him, of all people, lit something in me that I hadn't felt before. Not anger. Momentum. I started gathering everything she left behind. Not with rage, but with precision. I opened her closet and stripped it down to the bones. Every blazer, every dress, every expensive leather boot she used to strut in like she was always walking away from someone slower than her. I packed it all in boxes, marked them, labeled them, and then I drove to her sister's place and dropped them on the porch without a word. I didn't knock. Her sister, Claire, opened the door as I was walking back to my car. She looked from the boxes to me, blinking. "You threw her out?" she asked. I walked. "I just held the door," I said. Claire stepped outside and looked down at the top box. Inside, sitting right on top, was the silver necklace Madison used to wear to all her fake charity dinners. The one she claimed was a gift from me but had actually been bought with points she earned on his credit card. I found the receipt. She hadn't even bothered to hide it. "She's saying a lot of things," Claire said carefully. "That you were cold, controlling." I almost laughed. "You believe that?" She didn't answer, but the way her jaw tightened told me everything. Claire didn't want to pick sides. She didn't want to get dragged in, but she knew. She knew who her sister was. "I'm just dropping her stuff off," I said. "She doesn't get to keep the house." And with that, I got back in the car and drove home. No music, no radio, just the steady hum of tires on pavement and the feeling that, for the first time in years, I was moving forward. When I got back, there was a note shoved under the door. Her handwriting, smug, elegant loop. She always used that handwriting when writing thank you cards to people she secretly hated. It said, "You're being cruel. I only ever wanted to feel alive. You were supposed to love me through the mess." Just another attempt to pin her chaos to my chest like it was mine to carry. I tore it in half, then picked up my phone, opened my camera roll, and started deleting every photo of her I could find. Birthday dinners, beach trips, candlelit evenings where I thought I was enough. I deleted every fake smile, every lying kiss. But there was one photo I kept. It was from last year. She didn't know I'd taken it. She was staring at her phone, half smirking, thinking I wasn't looking. And I remember even then how distant she felt, how far away she already was. I kept it as a reminder. Next time someone shows you who they are early, believe them. A few days passed, and the house settled into a strange rhythm without her. It was like living in a museum where all the art had been taken off the walls, quiet, hollow, but cleaner somehow. I didn't miss her voice or her perfume or the way she used to leave the bathroom light on every night like she couldn't sleep unless some part of the house was glowing. What I missed was the version of her I invented, the one that never existed. That's the thing they don't tell you about betrayal. It doesn't just break your heart. It breaks your sense of reality. You start questioning your own memory, like you misread years of your life. You rewind to every kiss, every long drive, every "I love you," and ask yourself, was she lying then too? Did she mean any of it, or was I just a placeholder while she rehearsed her exit? And then came the dinner party. It was Ethan, my best friend since college, who invited me. He said a few people were getting together, and he figured I could use some social air before I drowned in my own thoughts. I almost said no, almost stayed home to stare at another wall, drink another quiet beer. But something in me was starting to stretch, like I'd been frozen and the thaw was setting in. So I went. I didn't expect her to be there. I walked into the backyard, made the usual small talk, accepted a drink, and then turned. And there she was, Madison, standing near the patio heater, wearing a smug black dress and a wine-glass smile, like nothing in her life had ever exploded, like she hadn't just torched our marriage and tried to frame me for the fire. She saw me, lifted her glass in mock salute, and then, to make the performance complete, she reached out and grabbed his hand. "Jason." In my friend's backyard, like we were all just going to sip Pinot and pretend the battlefield didn't still have bodies on it. Ethan caught my eye from across the yard. He looked like he wanted to apologize for inviting me, but I didn't need it. I held his stare for half a second and nodded once. Then I walked straight over to her. Jason looked nervous immediately. His grip on the glass tightened, and he shifted slightly behind her, like he'd already learned to use her as a shield. Madison didn't flinch. She smiled wider. "Jake," she said smoothly, "you look well. Divorce is good on you. Must be something in the ash." I replied. Jason opened his mouth to speak, probably something diplomatic, some desperate olive branch to keep her reputation intact in public. I didn't give him the chance. "You really thought this was a smart idea?" I said, keeping my voice level, walking into my best friend's house like you didn't just nuke my life from orbit, like you're the guest of honor at the circus you set on fire. Madison tilted her head, playing the victim already. "It's a party, Jake. People move on. You should try it sometime. Moving on isn't the same as running away with a lie in your mouth and his number in your phone." Jason stepped forward. "Look, man, I didn't know she was still with you." "I know what she told you," I snapped. "She tells everyone what they need to hear. That's her skill." Then I turned to her. "You said I was boring, cold, like that justifies what you did. But I wasn't boring. I was consistent. I didn't forget anniversaries. I didn't vanish for hours with no explanation. I didn't let another person touch what was supposed to be sacred. You did." For the first time that night, her expression faltered. It was only for a breath, a flicker, but it was there. Behind the mascara and the armor, a crack. "You always needed everything to be perfect," she muttered. "Like if anything went wrong, it meant I was wrong. You suffocated me with your expectations." I shook my head slowly. "No. You suffocated yourself." I just finally stopped breathing for both of us. Then I walked away, left her there, standing in her designer dress beside the man she picked to replace me. But here's the thing about replacement parts. They never quite fit the same. He looked at her differently after that, not with admiration, but with doubt, like he'd just seen the scaffolding behind the stage. Ethan handed me another drink without a word. I didn't look back at her again that night. The reckoning was happening on its own. The next day came in slow, like the universe itself was pausing to absorb the aftershock. My phone was quieter than usual. No fake check-ins, no passive-aggressive texts, no attempts to twist the narrative. Just silence, the kind you don't realize you've been craving until it arrives. But around noon it broke. An email. No subject line, no greeting, just a short message from Madison, plain and controlled. "We need to talk. I want to explain things properly in person." I stared at the screen for a while, not because I was debating, but because I could already feel the strategy behind her words. "We need to talk, not I need to talk. Explain things, not apologize." Always framing her betrayal like it was some philosophical misunderstanding, not a calculated series of decisions to lie, sneak, and destroy. Still, I agreed to meet. Not for closure. Not for peace. I didn't believe in those anymore. I just wanted to look her in the eye with the full weight of everything she thought I couldn't carry, the calm, collected version of myself that she had underestimated from day one. We met at a little cafe, neutral ground, public, controlled. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at an outdoor table in oversized sunglasses and a coat too heavy for the weather, always dramatic, always performing. She didn't stand when I walked up. She didn't smile either. Just sipped her coffee like she was doing me a favor. "Thanks for coming," she said, as if this was some awkward job interview and not a reckoning. I didn't respond. I just sat down, watched her face, and waited. "I didn't plan for any of this," she began, rehearsed but trying to sound raw. "I wasn't looking for someone else. It just happened." "Wrong," I said. "It didn't just happen. You let it happen." Repeatedly. She flinched at that, just slightly. But then she leaned in. "You don't understand how lonely it got, Jake. You were always in your head, always calculating everything. You'd rather clean the garage than talk to me." I let out a slow breath, and instead of saying "you lied," I said, "You disappeared into someone else's arms and rewrote the story in your head to make it my fault. I tried to talk to you." She snapped, the mask slipping. "You just didn't hear me." "I heard everything, Madison. I said, voice low. Even the silence. Especially the silence. You just stopped saying anything worth hearing. She leaned back, crossed her arms. Her defenses were rattling now. I didn't come here. Here to fight? She said. No, I said. You came here to redeem yourself, but you can't. Not to me. She swallowed hard. The silence between us was suddenly loud. And then she pulled out the last card she had. I miss you, she said softly. That hit different, not because I believed her, but because she thought that would work. You miss what I did for you, I said. You miss the stability, the safety, the man who built a whole life around the idea of us. But me, the actual me, you threw me away. I was scared, she whispered. Of becoming invisible, of waking up and realizing I wasted my best years. I didn't want to fade. And what now? I asked. Do you feel more alive? Do you feel younger, smarter, stronger? She didn't answer, because she didn't, not really. She looked tired. She looked like someone who was finally running out of mirrors to admire herself in. I'm not angry anymore, I told her. But I'm not coming back from this. Not ever. She looked down, then back at me. So that's it. I stood up. No, Madison, that was it. This is just the part where you sit with the echo. And I walked away. I didn't look back, not because I didn't want to, but because I had already done that far too many times. The next week didn't feel like healing, not yet. It felt like maintenance, like quietly rebuilding a house that someone torched and left you to sweep up. Every drawer I opened had something of hers, old receipts, necklaces, love notes that didn't age well. I didn't rage. I didn't burn them. I put them in a shoebox, sealed it, and tossed it into the attic with the rest of the ghosts. But then, just when I thought the storm had passed, it found a new way to reach me. Tuesday night, I got a call from Claire, Madison's sister. We hadn't spoken since I dropped the boxes at her porch. Her voice was strained, hesitant. Jake, I wasn't going to get involved, I really wasn't, but you need to know something. I sat up. What is it? There's someone else, she said. The room shifted. Jason? I asked, already knowing that wasn't the name she meant. Claire hesitated. No, not Jason. Someone else. She was seeing both of them around the same time. Jason was just the one who found out second. There was a long pause, and then she said, She's been playing both sides, Jake. She made Jason think you were crazy and controlling, and she made the other guy think Jason was just a friend. They only found out about each other after she moved out, and now she's apparently moved in with that one. My jaw tensed, not from heartbreak, but from the sheer scale of her deceit. This wasn't just cheating. It was sport. How long has this been going on? I asked. She told me it started before your last anniversary. That trip you took to Asheville. She left dinner early to take a call and met him at the bar downstairs. Jason didn't come in until months later. I closed my eyes. That anniversary, I bought her earrings. We danced in the hotel lobby. And now that night was just another well-lit lie. Claire's voice cracked. I'm sorry. I thought you deserved the full story. Thanks, I said, barely above a whisper. I hung up, then sat in silence for 15 minutes, maybe longer. My mind flipped through every interaction like a sick slideshow. Her fake tears, her regret, her talk of feeling invisible. Invisible. She was the main character in 3 men's lives at the same time. She wasn't invisible. She was everywhere. And suddenly it all made sense. The confidence at Ethan's party, the staged email, the crocodile tears. She hadn't come to explain or repair. She came to check the temperature, to see how much damage control she still needed to do, to measure how much control she had left. But now the game was collapsing. I picked up my phone and texted Jason. The message was simple. You were never the only one. Thought you should know. He didn't reply right away. I didn't expect him to. Maybe he'd pretend it wasn't true. Maybe he'd confront her and get his own carefully rehearsed version of the truth. Either way, the match was lit. By Friday, word had spread. Mutual friends started texting. People I hadn't heard from in years reached out with wide-eyed versions of the same sentence. Did you know she was like that? No, I didn't. But I do now. That weekend, I walked through every room in the house and took down every photo of us. Not angrily, just efficiently, like someone cutting dead branches off a tree. I boxed them along with the remaining gifts, letters, and souvenirs of a marriage that had been less a partnership and more a stage play with me as the paying audience. And then that Saturday night, something happened I didn't expect. Jason showed up. I heard the knock at the door, opened it. There he was, face pale, eyes rimmed red, holding a phone in one hand and a bottle in the other. He looked like a man who had just discovered the ground beneath him was a trapdoor. She told me it wasn't serious, he said. I replied. She told me you were a mistake. He nodded slowly, then offered me the bottle. Want to compare notes? We sat outside, didn't toast, didn't laugh. Just talked. Two men on the opposite ends of the same lie, comparing timelines, unraveling the elaborate web of manipulation she'd spun with the precision of a playwright. By midnight, one thing was crystal clear: Madison wasn't confused. She wasn't misunderstood. She was intentional. And when people like that finally get exposed, the silence that follows isn't guilt, it's calculation. She's somewhere right now, rehearsing a new version of the story, one where we were the villains, one where she was the one left broken. But this time, we're not handing her the pen. A week later, I got an invitation. Not a text, not an email, an actual invitation, printed on thick cream cardstock, hand-delivered in a golden envelope, like some twisted version of a wedding announcement. It was for an art show, her art show. I didn't even know Madison painted. Apparently, that was a hobby she picked up while juggling 3 men and a crumbling marriage. The card was signed in that same familiar script, "Come see the truth," finally unveiled. Not just theater. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, the card in hand, thinking. She wanted me to come. She wanted eyes on her again. This was Madison's next phase. When the ashes settle and she rises from them, not as a villain, but as a tragic phoenix, reborn through pain. I could have tossed the invite, ignored it. But something told me this wasn't just about paint on canvas, so I went. It was in some renovated warehouse space. All white walls and wine glasses, people pretending they understood what strokes and colors represented. I stepped inside quietly, unnoticed at first. The gallery was buzzing, people sipping Chardonnay and murmuring about raw expression and bold vulnerability. The hypocrisy nearly knocked me off my feet. And then I saw it, her wall. 5 large canvases, each framed in black, hanging in a row like gravestones. And I realized immediately, these weren't paintings. They were portraits of me, abstract, distorted, exaggerated. One with my face turned gray and lifeless, another with my head placed by a clock. One where I was faceless entirely, standing in the background while a red figure, clearly her, stood in front. The spotlight, arms raised, like some misunderstood heroine. The title of the series, "The Man Who Watched Me Disappear," hit me like a punch in the ribs. She wasn't just rewriting history, she was exhibiting it, curating her betrayal into something palatable for strangers to digest while sipping sparkling water and nodding thoughtfully. I turned around, and there she was, Madison, dressed in deep velvet, surrounded by a few admirers, already halfway through a monologue about emotional suppression in long-term relationships. The moment she saw me, her eyes lit up, not with guilt, not with surprise, but with satisfaction, like I just walked into a trap she'd baited weeks ago. She broke from the group and walked toward me with deliberate grace, stopping just close enough for the flashbulbs of nearby phones to catch our reunion. "Jake," she said, full warmth dripping from her voice. "You came. I wanted to see how low you'd go," I replied calmly. She smiled, as if I'd complimented her. "You inspired me. You know, all those years of silence, all those blank spaces, they had to go somewhere. You think this is bravery?" I said, my voice quiet but cutting. "You think painting me like some ghost makes you the hero in your own mess? I think, she said, eyes sharp now. That people believe what they feel, and I felt abandoned. No, Madison, I said, my voice lowering. You felt caught, and now you're dressing it up as a fable to keep your hands clean. People nearby had gone quiet, listening. She noticed, and she loved it. You never understood me, she said softly, more for the crowd than for me. That was the tragedy, I said. No, the tragedy is that I did. Every broken part. I knew who you were. I just loved you anyway. Then I stepped closer so only she could hear. But no one's clapping for you when the lights go out, and eventually they will. I left her standing there, surrounded by paintings of the man she betrayed, in a room full of strangers clapping for the version of her that never existed. The air was cold and clear, and for the first time since it all began, I felt nothing but peace. 2 days after the gallery, the ripple effects hit hard. It started with a message from Jason, short, clipped, furious. You didn't tell me she used my apartment as her studio. She was bringing him there too. I didn't even have to ask who him was. The third guy, the wild card. The man she had stashed like a spare key under the mat while she played artist, muse, and widow of a still living man. I called him, not out of solidarity, but out of sheer curiosity. I needed to hear how deep this performance went. Jason picked up with a bitter laugh. Jake, man, we've been lied to in 4K. Apparently, Madison hadn't just been using his place to find herself. She'd been bringing the other man, his name was Aaron, into Jason's apartment when he was out of town. They painted, they drank, sometimes they stayed the night. Jason found a mug Aaron had left behind, then a hoodie, then an earring that didn't belong to any of them. It all unraveled in 24 hours. Aaron found out too. How? I don't know, but his Instagram was wiped clean, and friends of his were sharing posts about toxic manipulators and emotional con artists hiding behind canvases. That night, I got a voicemail from Madison. You've turned them against me. You're ruining my name. This was my life too. I didn't call back. I just listened once and deleted it. That voice used to crack my chest open. Now it just sounded like static from a dying radio station I no longer tuned into. But the fallout didn't stop there. I found out through a mutual friend, Kara, who always had ears in every room, that Madison had been dropped from an upcoming exhibit, quietly. No statements, just removed from the lineup. Apparently, one of the curators had gone through a similar situation and recognized the warning signs in her work, the same performative sorrow, the same twisting of truth into art. It didn't land the way she thought it would. Then Claire called again. She showed up at Mom's, crying. She said, she told her you've been orchestrating a smear campaign. She's spiraling. She's losing the narrative, and she knows it. I'm not orchestrating anything, I said. I'm just finally not covering for her. There was a long pause. I think she's scared, Claire said. She should be, I replied. Not of me, of herself. Of what's left when the applause stops. The next morning, I got a letter. A real one. No envelope, just folded in half and taped to my front door. It said, I don't recognize who you've become. You were never cruel like this. You were calm, predictable, safe. Now you're turning cold, cutting. You're not the man I married. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't lamenting the betrayal. She was lamenting the loss of control. To her, I wasn't a person. I was a resource, someone who buffered her chaos, who kept her grounded while she danced between disasters. And now that I'd stepped out of that role, she was flailing, rebranding herself as the misunderstood victim, the lonely creative, the woman who only wanted to feel seen. But the truth had outrun her. The masks were slipping, and one by one, the people she played were leaving the theater. And all that was left was her reflection. No audience, no applause, no script. A week later, I received one final message. Not a call, not a text, not a dramatic letter left at my door. It was a simple email, sent at 3:12 a.m. Subject line, you win. The body of the message was even shorter. I hope destroying me made you feel whole. No punctuation. No warmth. Just a final attempt at rewriting the ending with herself as the casualty. But she was wrong again. This was never about winning. It was about waking up. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say, nothing she could write that would fold the truth back into fiction, nothing that would turn the knives she planted into anything but what they were, choices, deliberate, methodical choices made by someone who mistook loyalty for naivety. And in the end, that was her greatest miscalculation, thinking I'd stay quiet, thinking I'd wear the weight of her guilt like a coat she didn't want to carry anymore. Instead, I dropped it at her feet and walked away. She wanted to be the misunderstood genius, the tragic muse, the woman too deep for ordinary love. But what she became was a lesson. A very loud, very expensive, very public lesson. I didn't tell anyone about her final message. I didn't need to. Her name was already fading from group chats and social circles like a ghost that overstayed its welcome. Jason blocked her. Erin moved cities. Her sister went quiet again, maybe exhausted, maybe ashamed.